All right, what is up, everyone? It's your boy Mills Rogers. Today, I have the pleasure and honor of interviewing speaker, author, coach Jesse Cruz. So, let me tell you a little bit about Jesse. Jesse Cruz is an award-winning international speaker, best-selling author, and public speaking coach. As the founder and CEO of Merge Worldwide, he empowers diverse audiences to amplify their voices and share their stories in a powerful, authentic manner. He empowers speakers to create their own stage and get paid to travel the world with their family. So with that being said, Jesse, JC, J Crew, thank you so much for being with us today.
Mills, thank you for having me, my man. Appreciate you.
All right. So I'm going to just kind of jump right in. So, Jesse, tell us about your journey to becoming a professional speaker and coach. What inspired you to take this path?
Well, first I was asked I was asked by somebody, they said, "Hey, do you want to come and speak?" And when they asked me that question, I thought literally this person must be on drugs. Because why in the world would you ever ask me to go speak in front of everybody? Like anybody doesn't matter. That's just not my thing. And for some reason, when they asked me, I was shocked. I was humbled. And then I said, you know what? Yeah, I'll give it a shot. And then so I gave a presentation. It was a quick talk at a correctional facility. I did that, and I saw how it left a positive impact on everybody in the room. And then I realized I was like, you know what? Maybe there's something special here. And so I ended up volunteering at that correctional facility for 2 years straight, just to serve and just to give. And that's where I got my start.
So let me ask you this: were you scared at first to be talking at a correctional facility? You know, those guys are a little rough around the edges, and it might be a little bit intimidating. I'm just curious.
Interestingly enough, I was more scared of being a failure. And I truly believe that's what holds most people back in pursuit of their purpose. They're have this fear of failure, or they have this fear of people's opinions. They have this fear of, well, what if I make a mistake, or what if I mess up? And that's what ran through my head, and my stomach was in knots, and I was sweating, and I was nervous. And I realized this because first and foremost, yes, I'm doing something I've never done before, so it can be a little uncomfortable. And then I was like, I just want to do well. And I think people get so caught up in making sure everything is perfect that they never make any progress.
Man, that's deep right there. Yes, a lot of times we get in our own way. Yeah, there's obstacles in society and that sort of thing, but the bigger obstacle is usually us, because like you said, of people's opinions and a fear of failure. And oftentimes, it's not even real. It's just something that our mind creates. So, again, I appreciate that vulnerability that you just shared right there. And so with that, what were you talking about when you spoke to the inmates?
hmm Yeah, so I was doing the Sunday morning chapel service. So it was a faith based message. And then I tied the scripture into, real life scenarios and situations that they could relate to, stories of overcoming struggle and adversity. Because I believe anytime you're speaking, you always want to make sure that you can connect your message to the pain point of the people in that room and then provide them with steps and a solution to overcome it.
Okay, yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, you definitely have to talk to a pain point. Sometimes you see speakers, they kind of feel like just because they have a message, people got to hear them. And that's not necessarily the case. You got to be able to connect with people, and you definitely have to show an element of vulnerability. And so, yeah, I hear you on that. So, what surprised you the most when you first started speaking?
It surprised me that how sharing a message in front of a room could impact someone's life so deeply. I just didn't think that was possible. I didn't know that was a thing. And then I reflected back on speakers that I've heard in my life and how their message impacted me. But I just never thought I could be the one that could do that, because I think people typically fall into two categories when it comes to speaking on stages. Category number one is that they have gone through so much trauma and so much pain that it is too overwhelming for them to ever talk about, and they're just kind of damaged goods, and no one would listen to me because I got issues or I have problems. So people get into like this really negative state about they've gone through too much stuff to the point where it's just overwhelming to listen to. And then you have other people who are like, well, I've never gone through anything traumatic. My life was pretty good. I don't really have an inspiring story. So my life is kind of boring. And the truth is really in the middle. So whether you've gone through a lot of adversity or you haven't really faced much of it yet, you actually have the perfect amount of life experience and things that you've gone through that people still need to hear. And it's just having the courage to tell it.
Mm, okay. And so, um, as far as, your messaging and things of that nature, what do you find is, I guess, uh, unique about you? What is unique about your message that you share, whether it be to inmates, whether it be to the speakers that you coach? What is it about you?
Mhm. It comes down to being authentic. And so I focus a lot on storytelling. And I sometimes believe speakers can do one of two things. One, they're not personal enough with their audience, right? So they kind of just leave that out. Or they become too personal and now they're overwhelming the audience with too much stuff. So it's finding like this middle ground where you can share stories authentically, vulnerably, and make them relatable without overwhelming your audience, right? So it's invoking an emotion that builds trust and connection. So I realize that's something that stands out in my messaging and people resonate with that is when I'm sharing stories of certain struggles that I have gone through, it's not to trauma dump and it's not to make you feel sorry for me. It's to hopefully give you the inspiration to keep going, to understand that I'm a person just like you. We all have setbacks, we all have struggles, but it's not an excuse to give up. You still got to keep going. And
Mm.
so it's sharing storytelling in a way that builds authentic connections with your audience.
So, you said that you spoke to inmates, and I'm sure you've had a number of other experiences. When did you have that real, I guess, aha moment? Like, you're like, man, I can do this, I can monetize this. Yes, I'm in it for an impact, but at the same time, this is something that I can do to make a living and do it well.
Yeah. So it'll actually be when we hosted our first event. It was during the pandemic, which was the worst time in human history to do in-person events. I look at my wife. I said, "I got a brilliant idea." She's like, "What's that?" I said, "We're going to do in-person events." She looked at me like she wanted to smack me right in the head, and she's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "We'll get a room and we'll get people in the room. We'll talk business. We'll do fun stuff. It'll be cool." And she's like, "Jesse, like the whole world is shut down." I'm like, I know that, but there is one place that's open. She's like, where's that? I said, the restaurants are open because people got to eat. They serve food. We'll do an event in a restaurant. And she's like, you want to do an event in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a restaurant with zero experience of hosting events? I said, yeah, what could go wrong? And she looks at me. She's like, this is insane, but you have my support. And so I had no clue what I was doing, but I just knew that I was meant for more. I
Mm.
was meant to be in a room with people making a difference, making an impact, and working together in some capacity. I just didn't know how to do it yet, but I came up with the idea of having the event. So I made a post on social media. People started inquiring about it, and my wife and I we had a heated discussion about what we should charge. And I had such a broke mindset at the time, and I said, well, I'm going to charge money for this event. And she's like, what do you mean you're going to charge money for this event? And I said, well, we got to be taken serious, we got to charge something. She's like, well, how much you thinking? I said, I'm going to charge a lot. She's like, you got to be kidding me. You've never even done this before. She's like, how much? And it's a true story. I said, I'm going to charge $10 because to me, at that time in my life, that was a lot of money. And it really was. And so when I
Wow.
said 10, she said, you're crazy. This isn't going to work. I said, I think it will. I was like, do you think I should go lower? She's like, I think you should do it for free. I said, I don't know about that. Maybe five. She's like, I think five is too much. I said, I think 10 is just right. We'll be taken seriously. And then so I remember I got on a call with somebody. I didn't even know this person, complete stranger. They just seen my stuff online. We get on the call and he says, tell me about your event. And I tell him about my vision and he's like, okay, cool. And then he goes, the question I dreaded the most, how much is it? And when he said that, Mills, I remember I had the phone up. I just paused for a second because I was actually going to go back on my word and I was just going to say it's free because I just didn't think I was valuable enough to charge $10. And then I go, it's $10. And when I said it, I cringed. I was scared. My stomach was in
For
knots.
$10?
Over $10. That's where I was in my mindset. And then the phone goes dead silent. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this dude thinks I'm ripping him off and I'm a scam artist. And then he just goes, oh, like
Well,
just
scammers
10.
will want more money than that. So no.
He goes, just, he's like, just 10? Like just $10? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, oh, okay, yeah, I'll send that right over. And then he sends it over, and I was like, dang, I should have charged 20. Like the first thing that came to
Yeah.
my mind, I was like, 10 was too little. So and listen, at the end of the event, we had a few people around a dinner table in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a restaurant, talking business, talking life, right? And then my wife goes, so did you end up charging these people or did they come for free? Because I didn't even tell her what I was going to. She thought I was going to go back to the free. I go, no, I was like, I still charge them. She goes, oh my gosh. I go, guess what? We made some money. She was like, how much? I said, listen, we made $60 at this event.
This is
And she
great.
goes, and then I go, I said, you know what that means, don't you? And she goes, well, I said, we're gonna be rich. Because I made $60 in 2 hours. I have never made $20 in 1 hour. So I made $30 an hour for a 2 hour event. So to me, my life changed because I was so thankful and it really opened up, even though it's such a small amount at the time, it might as well have been millions because I just didn't think I had that within me. And every time, we've hosted an event, we've gotten better, attracted better people, helped them and served them at higher levels, right? And so now, it's a little bit higher than $10 now when we host an event.
Mhm. Man, I truly appreciate you sharing that story, man, because there are so many lessons in that. Just the fact that number one, you did it. You did it. You took action. And that's what separates the ones that get stuff done from the dreamers. You took action, even though it might not have been spectacular or whatever. You didn't charge $10,000. You charged 10 and you made some money off of it. And guess what? You learned from that. The information that you got from that experience, you're able to take and grow what you've been doing, because I've seen what you do and it's definitely grown. You've done it around the country. You came down here to Texas, right? In San Antonio and did it. And so audience, man, just take the lessons from that, because I've had an opportunity to talk to a lot of people over the years that say, "Hey, I want to get into speaking and blah blah blah," and they're looking for to jump in at that 25K payday or whatever, and it's kind of like that's a block for them. It's a block because it just stops them from even taking the small steps. And so I just love the fact that you took those beginning steps and you made something happen. You made some money off of it. And yeah, when you start making your own money, then it just does something to your confidence. It just shows you that, hey, money can be made. I have the gift. And so again, I just appreciate you sharing that story, because there's so many good lessons in that. And so kind of along those lines, how have you stayed motivated, with what you're doing, with all the ups and downs and everything?
Well, I've been blessed with an amazing wife and daughters who are looking up to me,
Mm,
and days where I feel like I'm not cut out for this, days where I feel like I quit. I just can't do this no more. Too many disappointments, uh, too many heartaches. I look at them, right? And that's the all motivation I need because I can't tell my wife and I can't tell my daughters to go after your dreams if they see me quitting on mine. So that is my reminder to keep going when I feel like I just can't do this no more. If I can't do it for me, I got to do it for them because they're looking at me. And I would not be able to have peace knowing that I gave up on my dream and it caused a domino effect to the people that I love the most to think that it's okay to quit on your dream.
man, that's such words of wisdom, man. So, with this speaking thing, a big part of what we do, and we're kind of evidence of it, is networking. And so, what's your insights that you want to share with the audience on building relationships in the speaking industry?
Yeah, there's no way to build, I believe, any business, but especially in speaking business, without relationships. Like, relationships are the currency of a business to grow. And without relationships, a business will no longer exist. And so being extremely intentional, whether that's going to other people's events, or whether that's hosting your own events, or being active on social media, it's continuously doing outreach, it's staying connected, it's being intentional about building those relationships because it's the relationships that'll keep the revenue flowing.
hmm So, what do you say to that person that's kind of like, man, I'm just not comfortable, reaching out to people. I don't want to hit people up in in their DMs and annoy them and that sort of thing. What do you say to someone that has that type of mentality?
So, I mean, I've definitely heard this with some of the speakers that I've coached over the years. Like, I don't know about just DMing people, and I don't know about all these things. And so, and I get it because it feels weird. It can feel pushy. They don't want to feel salesy, right? So there's all these things that they go through. However, uh, if they're looking to grow a business without building relationships, it's not happening. So, what are you even talking about? So, you can either be uncomfortable by, you know, not sending a DM, or you can be uncomfortable being broke. Which one do you want? Okay, because if you don't have the courage to DM someone, if you don't have the courage to put your content out and market and promote yourself and build those connections, you're not going to be able to have any revenue that is sustainable to live. And so, a lot of times, people actually self sabotage. They will not send the DM, they'll not make the post, they'll not build the relationships, and they will sabotage their own business and their own financial success and then talk about why they're so financially stressed.
Mm,
And because that's because they sabotage themselves, not knowing that that's what they've been doing all along because they have a little discomfort. I believe if you want to do anything powerful, anything impactful, you must choose discomfort continuously.
mm. So you talk about self-sabotage. And I know, this might be a deep question or whatever, but what are some other ways that you've seen speakers and content creators self-sabotage?
Oh, there's so many ways, Mills, but I will say, one that comes to mind is comparison.
Mm,
So rather than focusing on the gifts that you have, you actually focus on the deficiencies you have.
mm,
And then so what happens is you have like this telescope that you have zoomed in on other people from far, far away, and you see this great, beautiful life. And then you reflect back to yourself of all your flaws and all your failures. When if you actually flip the telescope around and you zoomed in on your greatness and the skills and the gifts that you have, And then you focus on all the needs and all the pains and all the problems of people out in the world that they need help solving, and you focus on their pain rather than yours, you could actually help more people. But we get so caught up in our own pain and our own problem that we can't even see the other people's pain and problem because we're in this comparison trap. And we're comparing our chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 20 and wonder why we can't even flip the page.
Mm. Yeah, I've definitely seen that myself where people are kind of like, well, I want to get to where you're at. Well, yeah, okay, that's a great aspiration. However, I had to start at chapter one. I had to start at chapter one, page one. The first year I started speaking, I had one paid engagement. And so, yeah, if you want to follow my path, then yeah, you're going to have one paid engagement that first year. And so, yeah, people have to understand where they are at in the journey and, put in the work. And that's one thing I've seen is that people oftentimes don't want to do the work that's not sexy. They don't want to grind. They don't I like to say that every passion has its dirty work. So, people are like, oh, it's my passion to speak or it's my passion to do such and such. But there's always a side to it that in order to do it, to maybe get on stages, you have to do a lot of things that aren't really, again, sexy, that are very tedious. They're very tedious. They're just not fun, but you have to do it to get that reward of getting on stage. So again, I appreciate you, sharing, those insights with us. And so with that, let's talk a little bit more about, I guess, the speaking experience. Have you had any, I guess difficult audiences or challenging experiences or, maybe negative feedback that you've received, and how have you handled that?
One time early on, I took a speaking opportunity to an audience I had no business speaking to,
Mm.
just because I wanted the reps. I wanted to be in front of the room. I walk into this room and I'm giving it my all. I'm giving it everything I got. And I look out into the room and literally people are sleeping. That has never happened to me. Like passed out, snoring, like I mean it's bad. And I'm like thinking to myself, I have made a big mistake and I should not be here. But I think that's more likely to happen in a situation where you're speaking out of alignment
Mm.
with your ideal audience. And because I was speaking to an audience that, I really couldn't relate to completely, it was a much more of a challenge for me to really connect with them deeply. And that was a hard lesson I learned that day. Even though I wasn't really resonating with them halfway through my presentation, I scrapped everything that I was about to say and went into a completely different direction because I was like, this isn't working. I must adjust on the fly. And so I did. And somehow was able to win some of them over. Some of them actually woke up because I had to change my approach, and it was a very valuable lesson for me. Is to try to stay more focused on the people that I know that I'm called to serve. And as speakers, yes, who's your message for? We think it's for everybody, right? And so it's not. We'd like to believe it is. Is there valuable lessons in your message that most of humanity can relate to? Probably, but it's not specifically designed for every single human being. And so we want to believe that it is. And it's just not the reality. And so I encourage people when you are sharing your message, get clear on who you want to help.
Mm. Great stuff right there. And yeah, I appreciate you sharing that challenging event, because oftentimes, on social media, we share the highlight reel. And if you've done this long enough, you're going to have a gig or two that just doesn't land quite right. It might not be to the extreme of where they're throwing tomatoes at you on stage or anything, but it's kind of like what you said, you can kind of just tell that, man, it's not really hitting the target like you want. And that's just a reality. Any speaker that's been doing this for a while will be open to sharing that. Whereas, some speakers are kind of like, yeah, I'm just dropping mics everywhere. I'm having uh standing ovations, for every gig. And, I mean, I know in my experience, a standing ovation is not that common. And so, you can't take it. And, the reason I'm sharing this is because we can't take it personal like that. You have to understand that, hey, sometimes your stuff isn't going to land quite right, but that's where like Jesse mentioned, you go back to the drawing board, you take the lessons from it, and maybe you tweak your message, or like you said, you stay in alignment with the audience that you need to be in front of. And so, again, good stuff. Now, I know you do the speaker competitions, and so, you mentioned your first one, and I know it's really grown since then. So tell us a little bit more about that and how that works and everything.
Yeah, so I get the opportunity to help speakers from all different industries, all different skill levels and experience to master their message on stage, to get clear on their storytelling, to really attract people into their business, but also really inspire and impact the room through sharing their stories of overcoming adversity. Right. And so this event is designed for the speakers to have a lot of the tools and skills that they'll need. So, I do speaker coaching with them, and then I bring in a panel of judges. People are typically in the speaking industry, as there is resources to provide extra value. We help them get their media done, right? All the marketing assets that they would need right at the event, right? We have a media team that comes out and handles everything for them. All right, so whether that's their, video footage for their reel, the photography, all those things will get done for them. So it's a multi-day event. It's really an experience for the speakers to really build meaningful connections, hone their skills of their content, and then I'd hopefully use that content to attract more clients into their business.
So, folks, you hear what he's doing? That sounds pretty big time. So this started off small, where he was charging $10. And now he's giving you all of these resources when people sign up. Now I'm sure it's more than $10, but at the end of the day, you're getting an opportunity to be judged, and possibly win the competition, and you're getting, a lot of good promotion from it. And um, so Jesse, so if somebody was interested in participating in one of these competitions, what should they do?
Yeah, I mean, the best way would be to, reach out to me directly, and then we have a conversation, see if it's a good fit, and then talk about next steps.
hmm So there you have it, folks, because I know again there's people that's always looking to get in front of audiences, and sometimes people just are like, hey, I know I'm a good speaker, and I want to be rewarded for it. And so this is a great opportunity for you to, hey, get in front of an audience besides maybe Toastmaster. And this is more lucrative than Toastmaster, and can probably lead you to better places. And so, again, it's always a great opportunity. And you heard what he said. If you want to be a part of it, reach out to him, and y'all, he'll determine if you're the right fit for it, and you go from there. And so, what else is on the horizon for you as we get close to the end of this interview? What things besides, of course, the speaker competitions do you maybe have in the pipeline?
Yeah, so, we'll be doing, multiple events that we'll be hosting for 2026. We'll have our cruise again. We'll be doing that in March, and then we'll have our retreat in Italy because we do this as a family. My wife and I, we do this together. My
hmm
my children are at all of our events. They actually play a critical role in all of our events.
So
Uh,
stop right there. So let me ask you this: how does that work with, I guess, you and your wife? Because I know your wife is an author, and I think she does some speaking herself, if I'm not mistaken. So, do y'all like ever butt heads or anything because, you might have a different vision of how to approach something?
Yeah, I mean, we have different skill sets, right? But we also have
Yeah.
different ideas on how things should look. So we've planned and hosted many events together over the
Mhm.
years. And I think it just takes time to learn each other and to understand that, just because my wife has a different opinion on something at one of our events doesn't mean that she's wrong. And
Mhm.
I've been more open minded recently to being wrong. In the beginning, I just wanted to be right. And when you're always obsessed about being right, you damage the relationship. And because that's all I just wanted to be right. Now it's like I don't care who's right. I care what's right. And even if what's right didn't come from my brain, I just don't care about that anymore. I just want to do what's right.
Because it's
And
a
so
win.
I think once I was able to shift the mindset from who's right to what's right, it changed everything.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I think it's super cool that you all are able, to work together and, do these events together. Definitely uh living the life of a power couple, so to speak. And so, Jesse, again, we're getting close to the end. And so, any closing message that you want to share with the audience, just words of wisdom and, because we have a lot of people that are looking to grow their speaking business and, they may be at a crossroads right now. And so, any words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience?
There's two things that come to mind. Is that a lot of times your family members and friends who do love you dearly only love the comfortable version of you.
Mm,
They don't like the ambitious you, the successful you, the entrepreneurial version of you. They don't like that version because that version of you reminds them that they never went after their dream,
mm,
that they never went all in on it. And so your success can actually be their greatest trigger. And
ooh,
a lot of times, the people that you started out with on this journey in life, they don't make it to the next chapter. And they're not bad people. They just don't have the bandwidth to follow you to the top of the mountain because they think because you're heading to the top of the mountain, there's not room on the trail for them too. And they don't realize that you can go with them. And not everybody's meant to go with you. That's point number one. And point number two, as you're out there looking to share your message and get on stages, rather than spending all your time waiting for stages. And this is something I help my clients with regularly. Create your own stage.
hmm,
That way, you will always have an audience, you will always have revenue because you are the one that's in control and owns the stage.
wow.
So, create your event, create your conference, your retreat, your summit. So that way, you always are the person who has some control. So sometimes when you're on other people's stages, and that's perfectly fine, there's nothing wrong with it, but you don't have the control or ownership over it. And so I think having both, not just one or the other, adds more unique abilities and assets into your business if you can diversify that way. So my encouragement to speakers is always have a way to leverage your own audience that you have built over time.
Wow. Man. Whew. Jesse, I appreciate you, man. This interview was fantastic. It was a great way to kick off my speaker spotlight. Again, just so many nuggets of wisdom and just super insightful. So again, I appreciate you so much for coming on. Audience, I highly encourage you to link up with Jesse if you're not connected with him already. He has some really cool things going on. Again, the speaker competitions that you may have an interest in. And so again, just touch base with him. He's pretty easy to link up with, easy to find. And so again, I just highly encourage you to network with him. And so Jesse, again, I thank you so much for coming on. Uh, Group, until next time, y'all take care.